In September of 2011, a small group of people gathered in the Manhattan Financial District, demanding accountability for Wall Street. Over weeks, they built a movement that would ripple across the globe. But what made Occupy Wall Street so powerful? Why did it capture the imagination of so many? And how does it fit into the larger story of resistance and inequality in history? In 2008, Wall Street gambled with the global economy and lost. The result? The largest financial meltdown since the Great Depression. American taxpayers bailed out the banks to the tune of $700 billion. Meanwhile, unemployment soared and over 10 million families lost their homes. One protester even said, quote unquote, "We bailed out Wall Street, but no one bailed out us."
This was the tipping point. People were tired of being told that corporate profits were quote unquote good for everyone, while their own wages stagnated and their futures dimmed. The financial crisis wasn't just an economic collapse, it was a crisis of trust. But Occupy wasn't just another protest. It introduced something new, a decentralized, leaderless movement that rejected hierarchy. Decisions were made through consensus in open assemblies. It was messy, but it was deliberate. They wanted to model the kind of society they hoped to create. The Occupy movement not only changed income inequality, in fact, it turned it into a major political issue. It also changed how we advocate for change around the world. Occupy was not a revolution with guns or manifestos. It was a revolution of ideas, a moment where the invisible became visible. Before September 17th, income inequality was an academic term, buried in economic journals, discussed in university seminars, but not on street corners, not in living rooms. The movement didn't just protest, it translated complex economic structures into one simple phrase: we are the 99%. Look at the progressive political candidates emerging since 2011. The minimum wage discussions, the renewed labor movements, the language of economic justice that's now part of our national conversation. Change isn't about winning immediately. It's about shifting perspectives, creating new possibilities, and showing what's been invisible. Occupy, therefore, was not only a moment, it was also a movement. Occupy Wall Street wasn't born in a vacuum. It was a descendant, a continuation of a long American tradition of challenging economic injustice. Think of the labor movements of the early 20th century, the sit-down strikes, the fight for the 8-hour workday, the battle against child labor. Those protesters were asking the same fundamental question we asked in 2011. What does the economy serve? In 1932, bonus marchers camped in Washington, demanding economic justice for veterans. In 1968, the Poor People's Campaign challenged economic inequality. In 2011, people pitched their tents in Zuccotti Parks. Different decades, same struggle. The language changes, the tactics evolve, but the core demand remains: a society where human dignity matters more than corporate profits. Continuity isn't about sameness, it's about connection. The protesters in Zuccotti Park stood on the shoulders of every movement that came before, and now, new movements stand on theirs. Look at today's labor organizing, the discussion around wealth redistribution, the growing political consciousness about economic inequality. These aren't new ideas, they're persistent ideas, ideas that refuse to be silenced. Occupy Wall Street didn't end, it simply transformed. It became a vocabulary, a way of seeing, a continuous thread in the ongoing tapestry of social justice. Movements don't die, they migrate, they adapt, and they continue.
It began with a simple challenge, a call from ad buses to show up on Wall Street on September 17th and bring a tent. But this call wasn't just a suggestion, it was a clarion cry, a rallying point for the silent majority. Though the movement was originally planned to happen next to the Golden Rule statue on Wall Street, police had barricaded the area beforehand, so protesters needed to move to the nearby privately owned Zuccotti Park. In the beating heart of New York City, in the shadow of financial giants, a few thousand people gathered, and the spark ignited. At the end of the first day, many set up camp in Zuccotti Park, and the floodgates opened. The Occupy movement was born. With no formal leadership, no central office, and no bank account, it spread like wildfire, from New York to cities across the US and then the world. People took to the streets from Los Angeles to Chicago, from Boston to San Diego, from Madrid to Cape Town, Buenos Aires to Hong Kong. The movement became a global phenomenon. Just a few weeks, it had spread to 1,500 cities. The 99% were no longer passive onlookers. They were rising. It wasn't just about protesting, it was a revolution of consciousness. The shame that people had carried with them, being unable to find work, to keep up with the bills, to hold on to their homes, were being replaced by something much deeper. They now realized that they were not to be held accountable. The real culprits were the greedy few, the super rich, the corporate elites, political insiders who had rigged the system. The people were not victims of bad luck, but of a systematic injustice. They were, in fact, the collateral damage in a ruthless game of wealth concentration. As they stood in the parks, they weren't just camping, they were reclaiming their power. They were no longer isolated, alone in their struggles. They stood together as one, a powerful collective. And for the first time, in a long time, they saw themselves as not the victims, but as agents of change. This wasn't a movement asking for change. It was a movement demanding control over their future. The occupation of Zuccotti Park in New York City disrupted typical locations of political dissent, transforming it into a vibrant political space for ongoing dialogue and visibility. OWS harnessed the power of social media like never before. Hashtags like Occupy Wall Street became a viral phenomenon, mobilizing billions across the globe and amplifying their message beyond physical borders. Its iconic slogan, "We are the 99%," influenced how protests are organized and framed today, inspiring subsequent movements to fight for $15 in the Sunrise Movement. Though OWS did not achieve specific policy outcomes, it permanently shifted public discourse, paving the way for progressive political figures and sparking global solidarity efforts. By reframing inequality as a systematic issue, OWS's legacy endures in ongoing wars for fair wages, environmental justice, and bold structural reforms, proving that collective action can change entrenched systems of power and shape future activism.
Occupy Wall Street was messy. It was imperfect. But it mattered. It changed the way we see the world and the way we fight for a better one. Because history shows us that change doesn't come overnight. It comes from persistence. It comes from people like you. And the story isn't over yet.